Good morning, kids. Today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcross Studios of him rebooting Danny Phantom. He was a kid. He was just 14. So his parents built a very strange machine. It was designed to build a world unseen, and then his molecules got all rearranged. I think that's how it goes. I haven't heard the intro in years, so if I'm wrong, please let me know down in the comments. I am so sorry, people. Let's go.
Today I'm rebooting the classic Nickelodeon animated series Danny Phantom in my personal art style and my storytelling style, changing a few things around as if someone handed me the reins to the franchise and said, how would you handle these concepts and characters? This is the second of 3 Mondays in a row where I'm doing artist reboot episodes, rebooting classic animated series. But even after these 3 Mondays, I intend to keep this series going, because even if it hasn't gotten a ton of traction yet, I really think this is a fun idea. And I had a blast doing that Foster's Home episode last week, so if you're new here and you also like this idea, make sure to subscribe to encourage future episodes and to see them as they come out. But for now, Danny Phantom rebooted. Let's
go.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like it. But either way, enjoy the show. Anger, frustration, and vengeance.
Well. Starting off with Vlad Massos, aka the primary antagonist of the whole series. Ooh.
Were all that had gone through Vlad Master's head for as long as he could remember. But after 25 years of work, his plan was finally ready to commence. Vlad had spent nearly 2 decades now working as the top inventor and contractor for the U.S. Covert Department for Ecto-Anomalies, also referred to by some as the Guys in White, and he'd racked up a massive fortune in the process, all while managing to conceal from his employers that he had his own phantasmal abilities. You see, Vlad had known since his teen years that ghosts were real. From personal experience and research, he'd learned that phantasmal beasts and beings could be created if someone dies but their soul desperately clings to life, either terrified of what lies beyond the veil of death, or in an attempt to stay on Earth to take care of unfinished business. If this happens, they can get stuck on their way to the afterlife in a place called Limbo, though some in the know would come to call it the Ghost Zone. Here they mutate into a new, ghastly form, influenced by whatever obsession made them so desperate not to pass on fully. They can then even occasionally find their way back to Earth to wreak havoc.
Wait a minute, mutating based on the unfinished business while in the Ghost Zone? I smell ink tank. I'm just poking fun.
Living. To those like Vlad who had seen real evidence of this in his youth, it seemed obvious that ghosts were real and posed a real threat to the living. But most he tried to tell this to just thought he was nuts. Despite growing up being taunted for his beliefs, Vlad had doubled down on them and gone to university for mechanical engineering with the intent to use his skills for invention to capture ghosts and reveal to the world that they were real and to rub it in the face of everyone who'd ever made fun of him. But things had gotten off track due to an incident with his friend/rival and fellow student, Jack Fenton. Jack and his girlfriend at the time, Maddie, had somewhat the same goal as Vlad, except they were more focused on studying ghosts and capturing them as a way to protect people than they were to rub it in anyone's faces, despite them also having received their fair share of taunts. The three would bond over what they did share in their goals, however, and spent much of their time working on inventions together. Until the day one of them malfunctioned in a more dramatic way than usual. Jack had been trying for a while to develop a machine that could open a gateway to the Ghost Zone, and he was a bit too confident that his creation was ready on the day he first turned it on. He didn't take proper safety measures and just activated the machine, with himself, Maddie, and Vlad all in the room, with Vlad standing the closest. The machine
Hold on, everyone. We're going to take a small break. I'll be right back. And we're back. Let's go.
Briefly looked to be starting up as expected, but then promptly exploded, sending spectral slime across the room. Jack and Maddie managed to duck out of the way, but Vlad was covered in it, and it felt like his skin was burning. He fell to the floor in agony before passing out. He came to in a hospital bed with Jack and Maddie talking to doctors in the room. Vlad quickly started to groan in pain. His face and flesh felt like they were somehow burning and freezing at the same time. He raised his
Ooh.
hands to see that his flesh was pale and brittle and coated in bright blue veins. His entire body was like this, and none of the doctors had any idea what to do about it. Vlad
Oh.
screamed at Jack,
Okay.
calling him a buffoon and a moron for what he'd done, and while Jack and Maddie both wanted to try and help, he told them to get out of his sight. He left the hospital he was in and intended to go to a private practice place, but soon found he didn't need to. There was a quick and simple way to reverse the painful, degraded effects on his skin. He simply needed to transform. Whatever had
Oh, there we
happened in
go.
that explosion had given Vlad the ability to transform into his own alternate ghost form, complete with the ability to fly, phase through walls, shoot ectoplasmic energy blasts, and far more that he'd learn about over the coming
He could walk
years.
through walls,
He could change
disappear,
into
and
this form
fly.
at will whenever he wanted to, and when he
Small,
turned
but
back
yeah,
for
okay.
the first time, he saw that in his human form, his skin had returned to normal. It no longer hurt and looked totally fine. But he'd come to find that he had to transform into his ghost form for at least 5 minutes once every 4 hours, or else his skin would start to burn and flake and go pale again. Thereafter, he'd never again be
Wow.
able to have a full night's sleep, constantly have to be keeping track of how long since his last transformation, and live in fear of being captured for experimentation. The way he saw it, Jack Fenton had cursed him, and he would have his revenge on him as well as on a world that had taunted him for his belief in ghosts. For 25 years, he'd stewed in this anger, patiently putting the pieces in place for his most glorious revenge imaginable. But by the time his plan was finally in motion, there would be an unexpected hiccup, in the form of a ghost boy with a similar physiology to Vlad himself.
Nice. But why is it that he has to change for 5 minutes every 4 hours? I wonder why.
Despite having spent years
There he
helping the
is.
Department for
Danny
Ecto-Anomalies to
Fenton.
hide the existence of ghosts from the world, that was all in the name of earning the vast fortune Vlad needed to have the resources to put his revenge in motion. Though he hadn't seen either of them in person since that day in the hospital, Vlad knew that Jack and Maddie had gotten married, had kids, and started a ghost hunting business in their hometown of Amity Park. They'd been written up in local papers many times for being hacks and whack jobs, but they ignored it and
Always
still managed to
insulting.
make a decent living from those who did encounter problems with ghosts. Vlad also knew that they had created a working portal to the ghost zone, which they used to send ghosts back after capturing them. But Vlad knew it could also let a whole bunch of ghosts out into our world.
Yeah,
When he
that's
was
the
finally ready to
downside.
commence his plan, he was going to draw out a massive army of ghosts from the ghost zone through Jack and Maddie's portal. With so many running amok, it would become irrefutable that ghosts were real, and everyone would see that Vlad was right. Jack and Maddie would be the ones blamed by the guys in white for the truth being revealed to the world, as it would look like a malfunction of their dangerous portal, and
Damn.
Vlad would be in the clear. He'd then leave his position with the guys in white as he'd developed his own personal massive stockpile of ghost hunting weapons, and would jump right
Oh.
into selling his weapons to the highest bidders, in a
Oh.
world that would then be desperate for ghost deterrence. Jack and Maddie would face
I can see him doing
incarceration,
that.
those who taunted Vlad would know he was right about ghosts, and he'd become even more wealthy than he already was. And the whole plan started with a secret visit to Jack and Maddie's home. He turned into his own ghost form one night to fly down into their basement, where he found their portal and opened it. He pulled out a device he carried that was essentially a ghost beacon, but just before he turned it on, he was struck in the back and nearly flew right into the portal himself. He turned around to see a high school-aged floating ghost boy with snow-white hair and glowing green eyes. Vlad had heard rumblings of some
There it
young
is.
ghost hero who was hunting down other ghosts, but he hadn't expected...
Yeah, when he woke up, he had snow white hair and glowing green eyes. He could walk through walls, disappear, and fly.
The boy to look exactly like Jack and Maddie's son, who he'd seen pictures of in his angry online lurking.
Bum,
The
bum,
cocky young
bum.
ghost boy talked a big game about beating Vlad, but with over 2 decades experience with his powers, Vlad easily trounced the boy and knocked him unconscious. And as soon as the boy
Yeah,
passed
that
out,
happened.
as Vlad suspected, he transformed into Danny Fenton, Jack and Maddie's son. While Vlad could have easily moved along right there with his plan, he suddenly got another idea. He felt certain that this boy must have also gotten his powers in some failed experiment by Jack and Maddie. So he thought if he observed the boy in secret for a while, perhaps he could fuel the anger that Danny surely felt towards his parents for cursing him this way. then lure the
What?
boy into working with him, making his
Okay, he's
revenge
a
on
teenager.
Jack that much more sweet.
He's a
And so
teenager,
he
so
took a
what?
step back to watch and learn about this phantom boy. But what he saw did not give him much hope for his new plan to pan out.
Alright, we got the main antagonist and the main protagonist. Who's next? Is it gonna be his best friends? Or, yeah, it is! Sam and
Reese's
Tucker.
eggs are back.
Can't wait to see. And we're back with Sam and Tucker.
Vlad was desperate to find anything to fuel Danny's hatred of his parents, but he never found any. He learned what exactly had happened to the boy. Before his parents had completed their Ghost Zone portal, Danny and his two closest friends, Sam and Tucker, had been messing around in their basement when a power surge from some work Jack was doing upstairs caused a similar accident to what Vlad had been through. Danny had gotten doused in spectral slime, his skin had started to burn and warp, but his friends and parents had helped him through it, and soon he discovered the same
Really?
thing that Vlad had on his own, that he could
Okay, so in this reboot, the parents also know about his ability to transform, not just Sam and Tucker. Okay, that's good.
change into a ghost form, and so long as he did that every 4 hours or so, he wouldn't start to deteriorate and the pain would stay away. But instead of this fueling anger and hatred from Danny, becoming furious with his father for the incident occurring, he'd basically exclusively focused on how exciting the abilities he gained were. His
He's
parents
right.
felt bad about the need for him to shift every 4 hours, but they too, and Danny's friends, were all ecstatic about what Danny could do now. His sister Jazz was
He's
a
a ghost
bit freaked
boy.
out that none of them were more concerned about the possible implications of this, but even she came to be supportive of Danny using his abilities. He started
Yeah, it's
working
in
with
time.
his parents on their ghost hunting ventures, using his abilities to help, and at school, anytime he needed to shift form to avoid the pain, or needing to go off and fight a ghost, his friends would cover for him, or even help him out in the fights. Everything he saw was just making Vlad more and more furious, until the day he decided to just outright attack Danny again, justifying it as needing to get the boy out of the way to conduct his plan, but really just wanting an outlet for his rage. He
Of
demanded
course,
to
I
know
can see
why
him
the
doing
boy
that.
wasn't more angry. Angry at his parents for cursing him to never live a normal life again, angry at the world for taunting his family's ghost hunting business even though they were right about ghosts, angry at the people at school who picked on him that he could easily trounce with his ghost powers if he just revealed them to the world. And
Come on, man.
Danny's response was a harder hit than any punch Vlad could throw. He simply
Ooh.
said that his parents had always taught him that it's not what happens to you in life that determines how happy you are, but how you respond to what happens to you.
There it is.
Sure, he could focus on all
Love
the
it.
annoying stuff that came with his powers and his parents' lifestyle, but he knew it was better to focus on the fact that he had parents who followed their dreams, regardless of what anyone had thought of them, and friends who supported him no matter what. And that he now had awesome ghost powers that he could use to help people. And if Vlad had gone through a similar transformation to Danny years ago, then Danny wasn't sure why Vlad wasn't doing better things with his abilities.
Why are you so
Vlad
mad,
wanted to
Vlad?
just tell the boy that he was naive and ridiculous, but Danny's words just sucked all the energy out of him. He said nothing else to the boy and just fled to think. And the more he did think, the more
Yes.
he realized that dumb kid might actually be right. Danny and Vlad had essentially gone through the exact same experience, but Danny was living a happy life, and Vlad had spent years furiously seeking revenge. When Jack and Maddie had wanted to help Vlad,
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget, the guy locked himself off in some castle that was owned by a Wisconsin king or something, whatever that.
he pushed them away in anger, and Danny had accepted their help with open arms. Despite how useful Vlad's powers had been in helping him develop his ghost hunting tech, and therefore his fortune, he'd focused on the negatives of having to transform at regular intervals. Heck, if he'd wanted people to know about ghosts so badly to stop making fun of him, he could have just revealed his own ghost form to anyone at any time, instead of plotting an elaborate multiple-decade revenge scheme. Even if he had gone through a difficult ordeal in getting his powers and facing taunts from others all his life, when he looked at his life versus Dan,
I mean, yeah, with how rich and powerful he is, he literally could just be like, I want a press conference. And goes up on stage, no stand, no microphone, and maybe he calls out to people to look upon him, and goes right then and there. People immediately start flooding him with questions, and maybe even one guy is like, do you plan on selling this power to the public people? You never know.
he was forced to face the fact that he really had nobody else to blame for how he'd been living. It wasn't the events that he'd faced that had ruined his life, it was
How
his
he handled
response to the events that had ruined his life.
There we
But just
go.
because he'd spent so long living his life from anger, that didn't mean that he had to continue to do that. And maybe someone who'd lived the same experiences in a much better way could help him out.
I am loving this, and I want more of these artist reboots. They are good. I love the stories.
Still embarrassed by how he'd
Ooh,
acted,
Emma
Vlad didn't
McLean.
immediately go to Danny and his family for
Emma,
emotional
not Emma.
guidance,
Whoops.
but continued to observe Danny's life from a short distance to see what he could learn about how the boy conducted himself, even getting to see him in action fighting ghosts on multiple occasions. The boy worked well with his parents, but seemed to enjoy even more going off on adventures with his friends. Plus, ghosts often seemed drawn to Casper High, where Danny attended school, likely because he was there. Eventually, Vlad found he wasn't even
maybe.
observing Danny just to learn from him. He was actually getting wrapped up in the obvious unspoken romantic tension between Danny and his goth and astoundingly wealthy friend, Sam. Vlad even started to realize that he was bordering on creepy how much he was spying on high school students waiting for them to finally admit they were into each other. But that would also eventually give...
I'm sorry, but could we imagine like Vlad is just floating invisible in school, like has a thing of popcorn, just munching away, watching all this happen, and but secretly he's just like, oh my god, will you two finally just kiss or something? I would love some fan art of that if anyone is willing.
give him an in to finally talk to Danny once again, which he hadn't done since their last battle. A ghost came into town presenting herself as a human pop star sensation named Ember McLean. In her time on Earth when she'd been alive, she'd been a failed musician who desperately sought fame by trying to film herself doing bigger and bigger stunts while playing her music. She died young in an ordeal where she tried to play a guitar while its neck was on fire, but
Ooh.
she hadn't taken nearly enough precautions and been engulfed herself, burning to death. She'd refused to pass on until she got the fame she wanted, and now, as a ghost with flaming blue hair that everyone who listened to her seemed too hypnotized to see, she was so hungry for fame that even if everyone in the world chanted her name, it may never be enough. She came through Amity Park
Damn.
playing her music for free on top of a tour bus while live streaming it to as many people as possible. The more people who cheered her on, the more powerful she became, and the wider spread her hypnotic effects were. Both Vlad and Danny seemed immune thanks
That
to
is
their
dumb
ghost
cool.
powers, and Sam wore a hearing aid, which seemed to be filtering out the hypnotic effects, protecting her as well. Unfortunately, when
Definitely
Danny and
hypnotized.
Sam went for a direct assault, Ember, figuring even just from a brief set of seeing their interactions that Sam and Danny were into each other, decided to use that to try and distract them from her schemes.
Love song.
She used her enchanted guitar to fire a concentrated blast of hypnotic lust energy at them both, which was enough to cut through Danny's defenses, but still didn't seem to impact Sam thanks to her hearing aid. Danny's infatuation with Sam was now so overwhelming that he ignored Ember and went right toward Sam to kiss her. Vlad witnessed that Sam initially tried to tell Danny to focus, that Ember was getting away, making it clear that she hadn't been impacted. But then Sam completely let go and let Danny kiss her, and just kept letting it go on, despite not having been affected by Ember
Oh
herself.
my god.
Vlad took that opportunity to take Ember down on his own. With his own well-trained ghost powers, it was pretty easy to wrangle her into submission, then use one of his own ghost containment thermoses to trap her inside, promptly freeing everyone from hypnosis. Danny and Sam then awkwardly pulled away from each other and both stumbled through saying they were both just kissing because of the brainwashing, but Vlad then came to Danny and tossed him the thermos with Ember inside, and asked if he could have a word with the boy. He started by telling him how Danny's words on their last encounter had impacted him, and that he may have
Oh, I
had plans
love
for
this.
revenge against Jack and Maddie, but that he'd left that behind him now, and was hoping he may be able to start over as a friend to Danny's family. As an extra gesture of good faith, he told Danny that Sam had absolutely not been affected by Ember's mind control, and that she'd let Danny mac on her anyway. Plus, she definitely seemed to be enjoying it. This, of course, while a bit embarrassing, did help to put Danny in an even better mood. Danny then brought Vlad to his family, and he finally had a proper reunion with Jack and Maddie, who were nothing but happy to have him back in their lives. Vlad even left his job at the Department for Ecto-Anomalies and came to work with Jack
Really?
and Maddie, significantly upping their resources with his wealth that he'd earned since their time in school. Vlad's words about Sam also gave Danny the confidence to confess his true feelings for her, ones that she absolutely reciprocated. They then finally took the step together from being friends to to being a couple. Over the next few years, Ghost
And yet, of course, you have Tucker just over there on the sideline, and just like, hey, what about me? Am I just supposed to be the guy in the chair with the tech? And then years later, I'm the guy in the chair with tech. Brought this upon myself, didn't I? Well, at least he gets someone, I think.
appearances would become rampant enough that the world would start to acknowledge that phantasmal anomalies were real. But by that point, it didn't even matter to Vlad anymore that people saw he'd always been right. He'd now chosen to focus more on what the people in his life thought of him, and those people were all just happy to have him there. Vlad would even have the idea for them all to go into the ghost zone on occasions to help those they found there to get over whatever thing they desperately clung to keep them from moving on to the afterlife. In doing so, they'd help many trapped souls release their own anger and fears and move on. The team would still have their fair share of troubles over their careers, but because Vlad was now influenced by the people around him to focus more on his reaction to problems than the problems themselves, everything that came his way became that much easier for him to handle. All thanks to a shift in perspective he'd gotten from an irksome little ghost boy who called himself Danny Phantom.
You didn't try too hard on the name, you know? Danny Fenton, Danny Phantom. Of course he didn't try.
Then what he knew what he had to do. He had to stop all the ghosts that were coming through.
What?
He's here to fight for me and you. He gotta get the ball. He's a phantom. If you enjoyed this, I highly recommend checking out the artist Reboots Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends episode from last week. Because even if you're not super familiar with Foster's Home as a show, I still think the art and story in that are really great. And I'd love more suggestions for other shows to reboot. I'm not 100% undecided on next Mondays yet. Definitely leaning towards American Dragon, Jake Long, or Kim Possible. Maybe Powerpuff Girls. I don't know. I do have a bunch of ideas I like, so let me know in the comments. Also, if you want the high-resolution art and the inks from this episode and from tons and tons of my other episodes, those are up for free on the Popcross Studios Patreon for everyone. Completely free. There's a $1 tier on there, but you don't need to be on it to get the free stuff. That'll be linked in the description, but besides that, that's all for today, except, of course, for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote from someone named Mark Groves, who says that rejection becomes welcome when we realize that it's the universe's way of saving us from mediocrity. Sometimes we're pushed away from something that we think we really want so that we can receive something that's actually that much better for us. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.
Well, that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below. And I'll see all you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.